Welcome back to our exploration of exposure. Today we're going to talk about shutter speed as an element of exposure. This is the second of 4 variables that we're going to learn how to juggle to get a properly exposed image. Now again, I'm going to start off with my friend the Nikon FM camera here. It's just really nice for demonstration to be able to see where some of this terminology came from. I'm going to take the lens off and set it aside. All right, and looking into the camera, you can see there's a mirror inside there. And then behind it, where you can't see, is where the film would be. So I am going to open the camera up so we can look at the back of it. Okay, so this little rectangle here in the middle is the shutter. Now what's going to happen is when I push the button, when I push the shutter release, the shutter opens, and you can see, I can see right through it, right? There's my hand. This is surprisingly difficult to do backwards and upside down. All right, so, and then when I release this, that shutter's going to close again. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do that for a certain amount of time. And on the top of the camera here, this is the dial where I set the shutter speed. So I'm going to set it for 1 second, just so you can watch what happens. Okay. So what should happen when I push the button is that the shutter stays open, stays open for 1 second, and closes. There you go. Now we're going to cut that in half. We're going to make that half a second. I'm going to cut that in half again. We're going to make that 1/4 of a second. I'm going to do this again, cut it in half, 1/8 of a second. Right. Now, this particular camera will go all the way up to 1/1000th of a second, which for the day was pretty fantastic. The Olympus cameras that we're using do have a physical shutter, and with that physical shutter you can go up to 1/4000th of a second, but they also have an electronic shutter which will let you go up to 1/16,000th of a second. Not quite fast enough to catch a bullet in flight, but it's certainly fast enough to freeze a hummingbird's wings. So let's take a look at that using the Olympus camera here. All right, so I have got it pointed back at our friends, Venom and Spider-Man and Buzz. I forgot Buzz's name. Can you believe it? And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see I'm at f5.6. That's where we left it after the last video on f-stop. Just to the left of the F, there's a number, and at the moment that says 13. Now I'm going to turn this back wheel, not the front one that I turned for f-stop, but the back one. And if I was holding this in my right hand, I could turn it with my thumb. And you'll see that as I turn that wheel, that number is changing. And as that number is changing, the picture is getting brighter or darker. Now, there are commonly used ways to do this. And just like with the iris, if we change by 1 stop, we're either letting twice as much light through or half as much light through. So we're multiplying and dividing by 2. So if you start with 1/2 a second, and then, or we start with 1 second, that's a nice place to start. Cut it in half, you have half a second. Cut it in half, you have 1/4 of a second. Cut it in half, you have 1/8 of a second. Cut it in half again, you have 1/16th of a second. But you know what? We're going to change that one just a little bit. We're going to fudge the number. We're going to call it 1/15th because it'll make the math easier for the next few. So from 1/15th, we go to 1/30th, 1/60th, 1/120th. But we're going to fudge that one just a little bit. We're going to call that 1/25th of a second because it's going to make the math easier moving forward. 1/250th, 1/500th, 1/1000th, 1/2000th, 1/4000th, 1/8000th. Different camera manufacturers will round numbers off at different places to make the math easier, but it's about the same thing. You're usually opening or closing by multiplying, dividing by 2. Now, just like with the f-stops, I can do 1/3 of a stop increments here. So right now I've got it set to 1/60th of a second. And if I start going to slower speeds, there I'm at 1/30th of a second. 1/30th of a second is 1 stop. more open. It's one stop. It's 1/2 or twice as long as 1/60th of a second. But you'll notice there were 2 spots in between there. I could go to a 40th or a 50th of a second on my way to a 60th. So just like before, I can do this in 1/3 of a stop increments. Now, as the shutter speed gets slower, as it stays open longer, more light comes in, and that makes the picture brighter. As the shutter speed gets faster, less light makes it inside the camera, and so the picture gets darker. So as I move this shutter speed to slower and slower speeds, my picture is going to get brighter and brighter. And you'll notice that the light meter at the bottom of the screen and the histogram just above it are both going to head towards the center, right? So I'll go down to a 30th of a second. All right, I want to move another stop. I want to move down to a 15th of a second, which is 1, 2, 3 clicks. Now I'm starting to get a decently exposed picture, and my camera battery is about to die. Now if I go one more stop, 1, 2, 3, I'm down to an 1/8 of a second. And now I'm actually, it looks like a little bit overexposed. So by turning that back dial, I am making stuff brighter or darker by changing how long the shutter is going to be open, and thus I'm changing how much light is allowed into the camera. Now, we care about what shutter speed we use because of a concept called motion blur. And if you look at these 2 images, you can see an example of motion blur. In one of them, the car is frozen, and in the other one, it looks like it's streaking through at light speed. Okay, this is motion blur. This is controlled by shutter speed. And don't worry, we're going to spend an entire lesson on motion blur later in the semester. But I just want you to know there is a reason why we care about shutter speed. It's not just about balancing the exposure. So the combination of these 2, the combination of our aperture and our shutter speed, are going to give us a certain brightness. And if we make a change to one, we're going to have to make a change to the other in the opposite direction. So let's imagine a couple of examples here. Imagine that you were shooting 5.6 at 1/60th of a second. f5.6 is your aperture, 1/60th of a second is your shutter speed. You decide to close your aperture down by 1 stop. So you close down from f5.6 to f8. Doing that makes your picture 1 stop too dark. It's 1 stop underexposed. How are you going to fix it? You need to make it 1 stop brighter. Well, given what I've shown you so far, your only option is to use a slower shutter speed. So you're going to take your shutter speed from 1/60th and slow it down to 1/30th of a second. Now you've made it 1 stop brighter. You made the iris 1 stop darker, so you slowed the shutter speed down to compensate and make it 1 stop brighter again. Let's do a different way. You're shooting sports, right? You're outside shooting football, and your exposure was f16 at 1/60th of a second. And that was a good exposure, but the images aren't sharp enough because the people are running, there's too much motion blur, and it's blurry. You're not happy with it. You want to use a faster shutter speed to really freeze that image. So you change it by 3 stops. You speed up to 1/500th of a second. You go from a 60th to a 1/20th to a 2/50th to a 500th of a second. 3 stops. Your picture is 3 stops underexposed. How are you going to fix that? Well, you need to let 3 stops more light into the camera. So you're going to open the iris by 3 stops, which is going to put you at f5.6. So f16 at 1/60th of a second is the same brightness as f5.6 at a 500th of a second. These are both proper exposures. It can be a little bit much to wrap your head around, but these are just a dance, right? Once you have everything lined up, once you have an exposure, fx at y, right, a certain aperture at a certain shutter speed, if you make a change to one, you have to make an equal but opposite change to the other, right? They're just going to circle around each other. As you let more and more light in by opening the iris, you have to make the shutter speed faster and faster to compensate for that. As you close the iris down, you're letting less and less light in. You have to make the shutter speed slower and slower to accommodate that. You can change either one. You just have to change both of them, right? If you make a change to one, you have to make an equal but opposite change to the other. Okay, make sure you've got your head wrapped around that because we're going to move on and add a third variable next. We're going to talk about sensitivity, or ISO.